Welcome or welcome back to the channel. My name is Sarah and I talk about books in my basement and this is my April Reads Part 1. It's been a month already. I had food poisoning for a week, so that was fun for me. I did get quite a bit read, but I was miserable. So let's talk about what I read while I was in the bathroom. At the top of the list, I finished Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes. This was a lot of fun. This is her second book. I believe a woman wrote this. This is her second book. And this is about what would I call her? A psychiatrist? Psychologist? One of those two. She works specializing in a condition that spacefaring individuals develop. I believe she called it RNE or RES. And it is punctuated by symptoms of like sleeplessness, forgetfulness, paranoia, and eventually these individuals will often dissolve into self-harm or harming others. And it seems very specific and very unique to the people who go out on these long missions, these exploration missions, and then they have trouble on their return. So something goes wrong in her personal life, you quickly determine, and she has signed up for a mission that will take her into space for many, many years. Possibly give her a chance to redeem herself, but also to get her away from the spotlight, because she is not only messed up in her personal life in a big way, or in her professional life rather in a big way, but she is linked to a very high profile family. She is the daughter of one of the children in this family. She does not want anything to do with the family. She doesn't want any ties with him, but it cannot be helped in this day and age. She goes on this mission. So they arrive, they land, and they find out very quickly this is a very snowy, inhospitable planet, and they end up bunkered down in what they call a ghost station. It is a large bunker style situation where previously the other team stayed. It is set up oddly, almost to prank the next incoming team. There are suits laying around, there's odd piles of material. They think nothing of it and they proceed with their mission. And of course things go downhill from there. So this had a lot of similarities with her previous work, Dead Silence, which I really enjoyed from last year. We've got a lot of isolation horror in this. We have a lot of are you seeing what you really think you're seeing? There is a lot, however, in this one. What makes it different to me is this is a very introspective novel. There was some of that in Dead Silence, but this is much more so. The first half, in fact, is really heavy with it, and if that's going to bother you, I'm probably going to skip this. I would say skip this one. It really focuses in on her internal dialogue and melodrama, and to the point where it's a little bit much. I do think that for me as a reader it paid off in the end, because I was able to understand and appreciate the payoff emotionally for her, but I can see that totally not being the case for someone else. Ultimately in this one, the final resolution to the problem, we'll say, that affects the crew is also kind of hand-waved away, which was unfortunate, but I liked some of the scare factors. I liked the writing, and again, I just consume her books so easily that this just flew by. Very introspective at the beginning, a bit heavy with that, and the hand-waving away of the problem at the end was a little bit unfortunate, but I really did enjoy this one. I ended up, I think, settling on a 4 for this one. That's what I gave Dead Silence last year. I'll continue to pick up S.A. Barnes in the future. It's that sweet spot of sci-fi horror where I'm just chicken enough for me to be scared easily, but it sits right there where it spooks me, but it doesn't like scare the pants off of me, you know? So that was fun. I enjoyed it. I must have been in a hell of a horror mood though. My next 2 reads were also horror, the first of which was Stitches, which is right here. This is short stories by Hiro Katsukihara and art. My next read was Stitches. This is short stories by Hiro Katsukihara, I keep messing up that last name, and art by Junji Ito, obviously, as you can tell. So I thought this was entirely manga. This is not. This is actually mostly translated stories that were collected by Hirokatsu for a magazine that he submitted at. I don't know if he actually wrote the bulk of the magazine, but he worked there and submitted at it. And these are stories that I believe he collected from friends and people he knew. There is one manga chapter in the back by Junji Ito, which is based off a collected true story. And these were really fun. These are translated like magazine submissions, so they're nothing, as far as writing goes, nothing mind-blowing or exceptional, but they were spooky, creepy, and Junji Ito's artwork, as always, is absolutely phenomenal. One of my next tattoos is going to be Junji Ito, so I am a big fan. So we've got illustrations on pretty much every page. There is something there, and it's very short. It was a quick read. I recommend it, especially if you're a fan of Junji Ito or if you're a fan of this type of serial short form spooky horror stories, which I very much am. I love reading this sort of thing. It's so far up in my alley, it lives there. So that was fantastic. It is out now. I purchased that one. The next horror that I read was Adam Ellis's Bad Dreams in the Night, I believe is how that title goes. Let me double check. Yes, Bad Dreams in the Night. Now, Adam Ellis is a online comic graphic. Adam Ellis is an online artist. He has posted his comics for years, and I have been following for years. So this was some stuff that I have seen, or I have seen teased because it's been on his Patreon, or some of it was in fact brand new, and I loved this. I had the book pre-ordered before I even got this e-arg, and I will get my copy and probably read it again. I loved it so much. And these are very short form graphic stories, horror stories, graphic novel horror stories that he has come up with, and they're all based somehow on something that's happened in his life or a fun like aside with his friends. One that I really enjoyed was inspired by the time he was doxxed very heavily by some very, very right-wing upset people because he is an out and proud gay man. So like you get that sort of thing. There's also, like I said, some fun ones. That one was based off a story he and his friend who moved had going back and forth. She left him and moved to a new city, and he came up with this wild scenario in her new house. It's fun stuff like that. My favorite things about this are, one, the fact that after each story we get a author note, and he explains where the story came from, his inspirations for it. I eat that shit up. I eat it up. If that is on any short story collection, I want to read it. If I can get the inspiration behind the story, I will eat it up. The second thing is I absolutely love his artwork. Like I said, I've been following him for years, so I read a lot of his stuff when it was simple 4-panel pieces. It was very flat, and in recent years he has bloomed. I think he has gotten fantastic. I love his use of space, his composition, and his framing. It's beautiful, and his color is always really pretty as well. So this was a win for me. I'm a big fan, if you can't tell. If you are also a fan, I would recommend picking this up, or if you just want to try some horror shorts in a graphic novel format, this is a great one to pick up. This is up there with A Walk in the Woods by, I think her name is Emily Carroll. I loved that one as well several years ago, so this is one I highly recommend. The next thing I read, I actually finished an audiobook. Let me pull it over here. And that is, that is The Fifth Criminal Intentions. It's Witchcraft is the title on this one. I was reading this on audio. By the by, if you are reading these and you have not tried the audio, you are missing out. These are phenomenal on audio. This is fairly short, and I listened to this while I was doing my puzzle down here. Loved this. The series continues to impress and just engage me in ways that most audiobooks could not. I am very much addicted to this. I cannot wait to continue on with Malcolm and Sanjay and to see where their story goes. This one follows Malcolm's return to work. In our previous 2 books, he was injured and kind of off the cases, and Malcolm and Sanjay have to figure out how their dynamic works again after him being gone for so long. And the crime in this one is one in which a man is brutally murdered in a sexual position. Thus the cover. Like, I'm talking guts ripped out with metal claws. That's not really a spoiler because the crimes in all these do always happen in the first chapter. And the two have to solve that case. I can't say much more because it's spoilery, but I loved it. The reveals at the end of that were incredible and had me like reacting out loud. Oh God, what? Like I was emoting. And there were a couple scenes in this that were so intense and like emotionally driven that I had to pause the book. I had to stop. I couldn't. It was too much. So love that series. Continue to highly recommend that series. It's phenomenal. It's one of my favorite ongoing series that I'm reading right now. I think, yes, I read one more ebook. That was Dragon Fruit by Makai Lucier, I believe would be the pronunciation on that. And this is like a Pacific Islander inspired fantasy. It's phenomenal. It's fantastic. 5 stars. Love this. Just getting that out of the way. This is about Hana, who studies sea dragons. She believes, exiled from her home islands and has spent her life studying sea dragons to understand them and to possibly find a way to return to her home island with a dragon fruit, which is the egg of a sea dragon. It's believed to grant basically a wish. Wishes come with prices, but it is believed to grant a wish to undo a great sorrow, that sort of thing. So she is actively studying some sea dragons and is captured by a crew of dragoneers that she is familiar with, and they take her kind of hostage against her will, and she is forced to help them hunt these sea dragons. Now, while she is stuck on the ship with them, they come to her home islands where she is originally from. She manages to escape. Once she escapes, she manages to get to land, and we follow her adventure, like what happens to her after that once she's back on her home island. Again, I really liked this. I thought it was very almost cozy. The stakes felt high, but they also didn't feel life-ending. And the biggest thing that I absolutely loved about this is we are so used to reading these stories where it is main character versus the world. Their family's out to get them, their friends are out to get them, they have no safety and security, they have no way to fall back, they have no help. That is not the case in this, and I feel like that really captured the culture that the author was trying to pull from as well. So it felt very authentic, it felt very genuine, and it was just refreshing to read a story in which we weren't trapped in this constant state of things are terrible and they're going to stay terrible, waiting for either the man or the female romantically, whoever romantically it is, to save them, or for them to scrape by the blood of their fingernails to win. Like I love a good struggle. I love a good adversity, overcoming adversity. I can't talk. I love a good struggle story, like just like anybody else, but I get exhausted by them. Like I'm gonna be honest, struggled enough in my life. I get exhausted by it. So this was refreshing. It was fun. It was very sweet. I loved the ending. The cover is gorgeous. So I'm gonna be honest, I used book credit and I pre-ordered it. So I'm gonna have it for my shelves and I will be rereading it. This is one that I could see myself picking up like in a low moment when I need something fresh, something fun to read, and I super recommend it for that reason. And something else fun, my last book that I finished this week was Butcher and Blackbird by Bren Weaver. This was just silly. I don't know how else to describe it. Do not take this book seriously at all. No ma'am. This is a serial killer romance. The 2 serial killers in this are I think he goes by the Butcher of Boston, and his name is Rowan. Yes. And the Orb Weaver, whose name I think is Sloane. Now look, first off, I want to say that is a stupid name for a serial killer. Orb Weaver. Orb Weaver spiders. I'm not going to put one on the screen because I know people don't like spiders. Orb Weaver spiders are harmless. They are completely harmless. They make beautiful webs, which is where she gets her name. But to name a serial killer Orb Weaver is so stupid. There are plenty of beautiful spiders that are actually venomous who make wonderful webs. Just throwing it out there. We could have done more research. We could have, picked a better spider. That's it. That's all I'm saying. From the Spider Nerd, that's a stupid name. In fact, I almost put the book down. I was almost like, really, that's the name you want? You want the very harmless spider? Cool. Okay. All right, moving on. Mini rant out of the way. Moving on. The story was just fun. It was silly. There is absolutely very little I can say as far as the plot to this. It's 2 serial killers who meet, they find out who each other are, and they set up a game. It doesn't, it kind of dissolves. It's not really that much of a game. They set up a game to see who can kill specific targets once a year, and in the end they're supposed to win the ability to kill this one big guy. It turns into they occasionally meet to kill targets and race to do it. They end up sharing the kills, and by the second half of the book it's just a romance. It's just a chef and what is it she does for her work? I don't think I even remember what she does for her work. Oh, she is a pharmaceutical vendor, I think. That's the second half of the book, is she goes to visit his restaurant and it's them falling in love at the restaurant. So the first half is a little front loaded with like gore and some kind of uncomfortable scenes where he loses control and a lot of bugs. If you don't like bugs, especially the first chapter, just pick it up at the store, read the first chapter, and that will tell you. There's a lot of bugs. I think people get turned off by that as well. So that's all in the first half, but the second half was so not that. It was fine. I enjoyed it. I didn't take it seriously. It was fun. There was a lot of good banter, again, especially in the first half. Second half had some good banter. It wasn't as much, definitely tapered off, but I will continue. I liked her friend, and I would like to know more about their history, and I think it's going to elaborate on that in the second one. The second one is called, what is it? Lark and Leather, or Lark and something, and it is about his brother and her best friend. So I will pick up the second book for sure and give it a try, because this one was just fun enough to keep me engaged. I read it in like a sitting. Just fun enough to keep me engaged for an entire sitting, though, like I said, Orb Weaver is a stupid name for a serial killer. It's genuinely dumb, because those spiders are harmless. I've carried around Orb Weavers in my hand, y'all. That's how harmless they are. Anyway, so that's everything that I read for this update. I am going to sit down and read this afternoon because this is stress. I am stressed. I am having the stress. Work is a lot. So what I am working on is I have the new KJ Charles Death in the Spires. This is her dark academia murder mystery story. I love KJ Charles. I have read almost all of their backlist, so I am very excited to get this. When I ordered this, only the physical edition was available. The Kindle edition was still on pre-order, so I don't know if it's still on pre-order or if it's out now, but the physical is out, so I have a physical edition. I am also reading The Wings Upon Her Back by Samantha Mills, which so far is okay. This is a science fiction fantasy story in which a religious warrior she's cast down of her order, and now she's getting caught up in a revolution that is kind of showing her the ways in which the order she followed may not quite have been quite so virtuous or as holy as she thought. I don't know. We'll see moving forward. It's interesting so far. It's not keeping my interest for long periods of time, but it's interesting so far. But besides that, I'm just doing some audiobook with the next Bergman Brothers, which I'll likely talk about in an update or two, and some manga. But that is it for me on this update. I will talk to you guys again shortly. It's me for update 2. It's been a couple weeks now, I think. It is April 15th, which means it's right in the middle of the month. It's time for an update. I just had a weird moment of, is it April? It is April. It is April. So I have read quite a few things. Not as many novels. I've been back on my reading shtick. I have quite a bit of manga to talk about in my next update. Let's check this out. That's a pile of manga. So if you watch my manga wrap-ups at the end of the month, I haven't done one in a few months because I wasn't reading a lot. That has changed. That has changed. So sorry, I know I'm moving the camera. A good indicator, if you are ever curious how to tell if I'm having a bad time, is how much manga I read. I read a decent amount normally, but if I'm like overstimulated and stressed, I read so much. I read so much manga. But moving on, you're still a little crooked, and that still bothers me, but it's fine. We'll deal with it. So at the top of the list, let's do with the arcs first. Let's get the arcs out of the way first, because I don't have as many of those actually as I do backlist already out stuff. The first of them is The Wings Upon Her Back by Samantha Mills. I call this a fantasy dystopian story about a woman who was a winged warrior vowed to her god, and she followed the edicts and the rules to the letter until she didn't, and she was abruptly cast out of her order, her wings torn from her. It's pitched as science fiction, but it feels more fantastical to me. It treads the line, I think. This is really a woman unpacking the trauma and the abuse that she has suffered in this established religious group, and how the love, the message of a religion can be manipulated and twisted by the voices, by the people who manage it. So we see her in two timelines, one of which she is growing up and joining this order, the second of which is when her wings are torn from her and she is cast down, and she ends up embroiled in with this rebellion that's going against the Mecca order. I can't remember which. There's like 5 orders in the city. There's the winged ones, the Mecca ones, the farmers, so on and so forth, and they're all supposed to live in harmony. They don't, spoilers. And so she gets caught up in this rebellion. And wow, I thought the trauma on page in Someone You Can Build a Nest In was intense, but this one, I do not read this. I just flat out am going to say, do not read this. If you do not like to read very graphic depictions of gaslighting, of physical and mental abuse, her mentor in this order is absolutely heinous. And the things that she does to our main character is just, I was deeply uncomfortable reading, especially the last half of this. It didn't help. I had food poisoning. Like, I was still getting over the food poisoning when I finished this. I still had the tummy rumbles. They came back a little bit, and this didn't help. This didn't help that. This was bad. This was rough to read. It was a bad book, but it was just, the content was intense. I gave this one ultimately like a 4, but I might round it down to a 3.5. It's not sticking with me, clearly. I can't recall to you the setting so clearly and the character names, but all I really take from it is that abuse and that trauma that she went through. And while at the end she comes out better, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good. And I read to enjoy. Occasionally I will read to, like, you know, learn things or see new views or whatever, but this was not I didn't enjoy this. I didn't enjoy this read. So this one, don't read it if you're looking for fun. This one wasn't fun. One that was fun that I would recommend is an arc, You Should Be So Lucky by Cat Sebastian. This is the second book in her sort of new series that she's doing, set in the 1920s with queer romances. This is, of course, a male-male romance, as you can tell from the cover. And this is about Eddie and Mark. Eddie has recently been traded to a baseball team in Mark's hometown. I think it's in Boston. And Mark is a journalist who is assigned to do a sort of baseball diaries sort of thing for Eddie. He has seen the bad press, the bad rap that Eddie currently has, and he decides to interview him and then decide from there, how does he want to write these? Does he want to villainize, or does he want to soften up Eddie's image and make him more palatable to the public? Fantastic little story. It's slow-paced, so know that going in. If you don't like a slow-paced romance, maybe skip this one. But I love Cat Sebastian. I've been reading Cat Sebastian for years and years and years. I think I read her first book way back in the day when it first came out, so I have been a fan for a long time. Her writing really works for me. And this story was very wholesome, very sweet. The slow burn, sort of drawn out nature of it really allowed you to connect and fall in love with these characters, and the side characters especially. At the end of the story, I was genuinely distraught by some things that happened. You saw them coming, but it still upset me. And there's a dog. For those that love dogs, there's an adorable dog in this. So I very much recommend. I loved it a lot. I need to read the first one. This, like most romances, you can read them independently. They connect. We get the characters from the first book in this book, but you don't have to read them in order to understand what's happening. It's a romance series. Everybody gets a happily ever after. We all know this. The last arc, actually, no, that's all the arcs that I have read. I'm not doing so well on my arc reading right now, but that is okay with me. But the other things that I read are physical books and an audiobook. So on audio, I listened to the third Bergman Brothers, which was Ever After Always by Chloe Leese. These continue to be good. This is a second chance marriage and trouble romance about Aiden and Freya. My only complaint with this, the only reason this gets a 3.5 instead of a 4 for me, is that simply, I honest to God, I skim the sex scenes, especially in her books, because she is so over the top and melodramatic, and I read these for the interpersonal relationships, like the actual romance, not the sex. And I was forced by myself to listen to the sex scene while mowing yesterday, and that was just... I didn't like it. That last, like, third I listened to while I was mowing yesterday. And man, her sex scenes are super cringe and melodramatic, and it's just not for me. Not for me. I will continue the books because I love the Bergmans, and I love the romances, and I like her writing otherwise, but man, don't read them for the sex scenes. The other book that I read, another old favorite, is KJ Charles. This is her newest one, Death in the Spires, and this is a dark academia murder mystery, a la like what with When We Were Villains and that sort of thing. This is about a group of six or seven, a group of friends in Oxford, and then one of them is murdered. And it kind of has a ripple effect through everyone's life, but specifically Jim. Jim was a young man who went to Oxford on sort of a scholarship. He had a club foot, and he was from a poor family, and he gets caught up with these rich upper class people. And when the murder happens, it absolutely ruins his life. He cannot sit for his exams. He has a bit of he develops an anxious sort of problem with it, and he ends up not graduating with a degree. Some years later, he is at a job, and someone sends an anonymous letter because this murder was never solved. Someone sends a letter that says Jim killed Toby, and Jim did not kill Toby, but Jim knows that one of their friends had to have done it. So he sets out to determine which of the friends killed Toby. And that's the story. There is a queer romance in here because KJ Charles usually writes queer romances, but the focus of the story is on the mystery and the whodunit of this friend group. This has a very slow sort of start as Jim sits down and decides what he's going to do. He, at first, isn't sure if he should investigate this murder or dig up all this old trauma, but he does decide to do so, and we see him go from there. After the halfway point, it gets really intense as we learn people's stories and we start to suspect, what's going on and who's doing what. And there is a little bit of a twist with some previously unknown crimes coming to light, and it was just, I really enjoyed it. I think it was like a 4 for me ultimately. Again, KJ Charles is a favorite of mine. I've read her books as long as I've read Cat Sebastian, to be honest. I think I read Cat, and then I was like, I want something like this, and I ended up on KJ Charles, and we've gone from there. So really liked this. I tapped the crap out of it. I don't usually care for dark academia books, but this one really worked for me. So if you like that sort of thing, give it a shot. And finally, I read 6 Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. I just realized I read a lot of romance and like comfort authors. Makes sense. That's where we're at. But 6 Scorched Roses. This is the novella between Serpent in the Wings of Night and the last one, something Ashes King. I can't remember the title of it. But this is the one in between. I liked this a lot, actually. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling about Lilith, who is attempting to solve a plague that is wrecking her village because the gods, who are petty, despicable creatures, the god of her town has decided he no longer cares for this town, and he has blighted them with this plague that basically your skin turns to dust and you wither away. This sounds horrible. She's decided she's going to solve this and like find a cure. And to do that, she has gone up to the manor of this vampire that lives nearby. This does not take place on the same continent as Serpent in the Wings of Night, but on a neighboring continent. So vampires are known, they're just not commonly seen here. So she goes up there. He is a brooding, dark, mysterious figure, and she says, I need some of your blood to find this cure. And she makes him a deal. She'll give him a rose for each time he allows her to draw blood. That's the title, 6 Scorched Roses. And these characters, I do believe, are going to be in the second book, which I have started, but I have not yet finished. So I need to get back on that. But I really liked this. I really did. I like Beauty and the Beast retellings typically, and this one really worked well. I think she did a good job with it. There's not a whole lot to say about it. It is a very short read. I read it in almost a sitting, but I think you can skip it if you're reading the series, but for funsies, I think you should read it because it's fun. Also, if you just want to try out her writing, this would be a great way to do so. You don't actually need any sort of understanding of what happened in the first book to understand the plot of this one. It will talk about the houses and the types of vampires that you get more information on in the first book, but you could totally read this on its own. If you just want to try out Carissa Broadbent's writing, give this a shot. It was really good. I had a good time. There wasn't a lot of sex scenes that I had to skip. It was mostly plot, and that's what I want. I want plot. I want plot over everything. That's it for this update and for this first part of my April reads. To close out, I am currently reading Can't Spill Treason Without Tea. I have the Arc of the published version of this. This is the indie version that was out last year, the year before last. So I'm currently reading this. I am about a quarter of the way in. I would like to finish this because I'm considering going to Knoxville for her signing in May. So I'm considering going there, and I want to have that read for sure before I go. I am also reading Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. I have that on ebook, and my current audiobook, I am rereading Empire of Exiles, because Relics of Ruin comes out at the end of the month, and I want to reread this before I read Relics of Ruin because I adore Empire of Exiles. Y'all sleeping on that book. That's all I have to say about that. Fan-freaking-tastic book. I am listening to that while I do puzzle because I am on a puzzling kick. I'm about to finish my puzzle, in fact, and when I do, I might as well show you. I'm going to do this tiny little Lego for my bookshelf. It's just little cherry blossoms, but after that, I am freaking over the moon. My husband tried to buy me one of these for Christmas, and it never came in. So we were at the craft store and saw one. It's the Book Nook in Wonderland. It's like a miniature thing. You build like a model. Hope you can see it. I am so excited about this. This is going to be so much fun. I love to build things. I love puzzles. So I'm excited. There's some little tiny ones. Also, they're like $10, $15. I might get some of the little tiny ones later too and like put in above my shelves. But anyway, I'm starting to ramble. That is it for the end of this update. I will talk to you guys again probably in my next video. I am thinking about mixing up the video formats again, so I may go back to a three book review sort of situation. We'll see what happens, and I will hopefully have a bit more time to film in the next coming months. Fingers crossed. So I will talk to you guys again soon. Thanks so much for watching, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you again soon. Bye, y'all.